card before any of the fights were announced. And I had 5 on the main card, 4 on the prelims, and 4 on the early prelims. And man, if the UFC would have gone, I don't want to get on Dana's bad side. You know, he was shitting on all those MMA YouTubers. But man, I liked UFC 300. That's my personal opinion. Could it have been better? Yes, but anything could always be better. So today, we're going to go ahead and compare UFC 300 versus Full Fighting MX's UFC 300. That matchmaking video was my most popular video on the channel, so it is going to be fun to like revisit and, you know, see how they approached UFC 300 and how I thought it was going to look like. Man, I'm not going to lie, my card was absolutely insane. I know a lot of people in the comments were saying this could never happen, but honestly, I'm going to give you my takes on why I think these fights could have happened. All right, number 13. On UFC 300, we got Cody Garbrandt versus Davison Figueiredo. What we could have got is Dillon Danis versus Michael Chiesa. Now, I am going to go over this later on in the video, but I did have on my own personal card on the prelims, I had Cody Garbrandt versus Figueiredo. So that's literally the only fight that I predicted right to be on UFC 300. So let's go. That's a win in my book. But man, why didn't you guys sign Dillon Danis? I mean, I know Dana was on the Full Send podcast, and, you know, he said that there's a bunch of problems with signing Dillon Danis, like all that stuff that he does outside, you know, during his fight promotions. That's not going to, like, hang over here at the UFC. But, dude, Dillon Danis is a star, man. I think so. I think everybody was so, like, they were glued to their screens, like glued on Twitter when he was doing all that stuff with Logan Paul's fiance, man. It was hilarious stuff. I feel like the only reason I watched that Misfits boxing card was because of the Dillon Danis Logan Paul fight. So I was honestly, man, I was kind of bummed out when all the talks of him joining the UFC after or before kind of died down almost immediately when Dana shot that down. But I think it would have been really dope to see Dillon Danis on UFC 300. He for sure would have built up the fight with Michael Chiesa. Probably would have gone after Chiesa's mom or something. But I thought that would have been cool for 300, man. Chiesa versus Dillon Danis. We could see how far Dillon can actually take it in the UFC. Probably would have got stopped by Chiesa in hindsight, looking back at how bad he looked against Logan Paul. But I thought it would have been fun, you know? And if we're being honest, in the fight with Danis and Chiesa, you know he would have just shot on Chiesa and tried to get him in a darts choke, bro. Like, come on. But instead, we got Cody Garbrandt versus Figueiredo, which it was a fun fight. I'm not going to lie. It was cool. But I think it could have been funner, man. I think in my opinion, I was thinking that Cody and Figgy, they were just going to go out there first round, lay each other both out, kind of in Yoel versus Paulo Costa fashion, where each guy is getting dropped first. But nah, we got, you know, a little bit of hesitancy from both guys. Cody showing some speed in the first round and then, you know, getting destroyed on the ground by Figgy in the second round. So, I don't know, man. I'm going to just say right now, if I could run it back, I think I'd rather see Dillon and Chiesa, just because I'd love to see what Dillon would say at the press conference and talk shit to all the other fighters, man. And yeah, it would have just, this prediction is, or like this analysis is only pure based solely on memes. Like for the memes, I think you should have put Dillon Danis in the UFC. So now, what we could have gone for number 12 was Andre Petrosky versus Bo Nickel, but what we did get on UFC 300 was Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. Now, before everybody attacks me in the comments over Andre Petrosky and Bo Nickel, in hindsight, it was a bad play. It was a bad play putting Andre Petrosky against Bo Nickel because the guy just got hip KO'd by Jacob Malkoui, and that is a horrible look for him. But you know, before that happened, man, I thought this would have been a really competitive fight between him and Bo Nickel. You know, he's been calling out Bo Nickel for like 2 years now. And I don't know. I would have preferred to see that one over the Cody Brundage fight on paper. But looking back now, I'm kind of glad they did do, you know, Bo Nickel versus Cody Brundage, because we see what level Bo Nickel operates of as of right now. Like, the guy's not fighting any top 5 fighters anytime soon. But I did have it as the second fight of the night, so you guys cannot attack me for having it on the main card, opening up the main card, dude. That is insane. But yeah, instead we got Bobby Green versus Jim Miller, which is an amazing fight, honestly. It was a great fight on paper, and it was a great fight over there at UFC 300, man. If you would have put that on any other card, that could have easily won fight of the night, man. And incredible performance by Bobby Green. In that fight, I did take Jim Miller just because I thought Bobby was coming back too soon after the Jalen Turner loss, and I thought Jim Miller, could crack, and he's been cracking people at this older age. And plus, to be fair, I thought Bruce Buffer was going to announce him as, Jim fucking Miller, and then the guy was going to get all of a sudden like Super Saiyan hair and just go out there and flatline Bobby Green. But honestly, I blame Jim Miller's loss at UFC 300 on Bruce Buffer. This is his fault, man. If he would have just said, fucking in the middle of Jim Miller's name instead of A10, then we would have got an easy first round knockout. But no, instead he got battered on the feet by Bobby Green. So in hindsight, I do pick the Bobby Green versus Jim Miller fight all day over Petrosky and Bo Nickel. Now, number 11, on UFC 300, we got Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. But what we could have got was Patty the Batty versus Bobby Green. So in my UFC 300 card, I still had Bobby Green in it. I thought, for sure he's got to be on 300, bro. Like, you got to put him on 300. He's one of those fighters that you want to have on that type of card. But, I, didn't want to see the Jim Miller fight. I would have preferred to see, him versus Patty, because Patty is also a very big star and he needs a bump up in competition. We want to see him fight ranked guys now. And there's no other better opponent than Bobby Green for him, because Bobby Green's going to test him, bro. He's going to get fraud checked, or he's either going to be like, smoking Bobby Green. So it was on paper, it's a really good fight. But we didn't get that. But we might get that soon, actually. Bobby called him out right after he demolished Jim Miller. He said that he wants to beat up, Patty in England. So that might be the next fight to make. I just would have preferred to see it a little bit sooner on UFC 300. And if you're going to ask me if I prefer this over Marina Rodriguez and Jessica Andrade, I 100% do. I'm going to give us a point there. So, yeah. Then, closing out the early prelims, we had Renato Money Moicano taking on Jalen, the Skyscraper Tarantula. We got that. But what we could have got on UFC 300 was Jim Miller versus Tony Ferguson. Now, this one's a little bit hard because I love Money Moicano. Bro, he's like one of my favorite fighters in the UFC right now. So I was so happy that he beat up Jalen Turner, man. He beat the dog shit out of him, really walked him on a leash. Jalen Turner is definitely a bozo for letting him survive, man. I don't know who he thought he was. But that being said, Jim Miller versus Tony Ferguson, man, I think that fight makes a lot of sense. I think it makes more sense now than it did beforehand. The reason why I wanted Jim to fight Tony in the first place was because I think Jim needed a step up in competition, fighting a big name guy to really get him into the rankings. But the UFC said, no, we're just going to give him a ranked opponent in Bobby Green. Okay, it's fine. But, I think Jim and Tony was going to be one for the fans and really one for the hardcore legends. I think you can still make that fight today. I think you can still make that fight today, so I don't think there was a need to put it on UFC 300. So I'm going to give this one to the UFC, and that closes out the early prelims. We're 2-2 right now. I got 2 points for us, 2 points for the UFC. And then now we go into the prelims, man. The first fight we had up was Diego Lopez versus Sadiq Yusuff, but what we could have got was Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega. Now, I did put this one on UFC 300, but it did end up happening before then on UFC Mexico. My prediction came true. Yair, was beating up Brian Ortega on the feet, and then, even dropped him, bro. And then second round, freaking Ortega goes out there and submits Yair. I think that would have been a cool moment for the fans over at UFC 300. I think, the Las Vegas crowd would have gone crazy. But I do agree that this is a fight that should have been on the Mexico card. Like, both are Mexican guys. So, honestly, I'm not even mad that it wasn't on UFC 300. Plus, the Yusuff versus Diego Lopez fight, I mean, bro, Diego Lopez is on a different level. I actually really want to see how he does against Ortega or Yair. I think more so Ortega because, there's the jiu-jitsu side for both guys. So, yeah, I'm going to give a point to the UFC for this one, man. You know, literally, bro, Diego Lopez came out there and just finished Sadiq like he was nothing. So I think that one's a little bit more exciting than, you know, Yair and Ortega, you know, kind of pit-patting around and then something happens at the end. And then, I don't know. I preferred that one in Mexico. This one for UFC 300 wasn't that bad, so I'm going to give a point to the UFC. All right, next up, we have what happened was Kayla Harrison versus Holly Holm. What we could have got, though, would have been Cody Garbrandt versus Davison Figueiredo. Now, I would have 100%. I'm going to let you know right now, bro. Kayla Harrison, she looked good in the fight, but, bro, I did not care for it at all, bro. Like, during that time, I went to the restroom. I went to go grab a snack. I went to go walk my dog. Like, I could not have cared less that Kayla Harrison was fighting Holly Holm. I don't know why they decided to put this on UFC 300. I think it's, you know, because they want to promote Kayla and potentially her winning the title and then potentially her fighting Amanda Nunes. And they're just trying to create the storyline right there and then in front of a larger audience. But bro, this would have been a perfect spot for Cody and Figgy, man, on the prelims, man. I mean, yeah, they still had it on the card though, so it really doesn't matter. But let's just put it like this: what would I have rather watched, Holly Holm and Kayla or Cody Garbrandt and Figgy? I'm picking Cody Garbrandt and Figgy all day. That's a point for us. Let's go. All right, next up we have Aljamain Sterling and versus Calvin Kattar. This is what we got at UFC 300 compared to what we would have gotten in Khamzat Chimaev versus Paulo Costa. You are absolutely insane if you pick Aljamain, you know, stinking it up against Calvin Kattar over Costa and Chimaev. Now, remember, when I made this prediction video, this is before they decided to do Costa versus Strickland and do Khamzat versus Whitaker. The reason why I think it would have been a better fight to do Costa, actually, this is even before they confirmed Costa versus Whitaker originally in February, now that I think about it. So, man, Costa's been active. That's crazy. But, and Whitaker, what the heck? Both those guys have been active. But, all right, here's the thing. Back then, if we would have gone to April, I think the best move was to make Costa versus Chimaev, just because Chimaev was still, you know, he's still like outside of the top 10 and Costa's ranked ahead of him. And even though Costa pulled out of the fight, he did have staph infection. It wasn't like he shit the bed and he was like, no, I don't want to fight. He did want to fight. He just had staph. So I think the next proper step after the Usman fight, I think you should have done, you know, Costa versus Khamzat, man. Or you could have even done an Usman rematch. I don't know. I just didn't really want to see, like, I'm interested for sure in the Whitaker matchup for Khamzat, but I just think for UFC 300, I thought it would have been wise. Let's do Khamzat versus Costa. And you can't tell me that Costa wasn't prepared because he fought in February. And maybe Khamzat wasn't prepared because it was in April and, you know, they got that whole Ramadan thing going on. So, yeah, in hindsight, though, I still would have 100% picked watching Khamzat versus Paulo Costa over Aljamain and Calvin. Which, props to Aljamain. I thought he had a good performance, but, man, it just wasn't 300 worthy, bro. Like, I'm sorry. And next up, closing out the prelims, we got Yuri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic, which was an amazing fight, bro. It was honestly super fun, super interesting. That's what we got. But we could have got Colby Coving versus Wonderboy Thompson. Now, I really wanted Colby on this card, man. After December, I didn't think he took that much damage, so I thought he could make a turnaround and fight on UFC 300. Same thing for Wonderboy, bro. He didn't take much damage against Shavkat Rakhmonov, so I thought April would be a good turnaround for him and make that fight between two guys that are veterans of the welterweight division, and they didn't really have any other, you know, path to get to, you know, the top of the division other than themselves. So I thought Colby versus Wonderboy would be a really awesome fight to watch. But in hindsight, though, I know that a lot of people were, you know, crapping on Rakic versus Yuri, you know, because at first sight, we thought that Rakic was just going to wet blanket him and kind of stink it up on the feet and on the ground. But, man, Yuri was the one that changed that whole dynamic. I mean, that first round was really, really fun to watch because we were watching, like, Yuri get picked apart on the feet. And then that second round, he goes out there and says, you know what, you know, forget it, bro. Like, I'm going to go out there. If I get knocked out, I get knocked out, but I'm going to chin this dude. And he he went out there and chinned that dude. Like, he beat him up like he owed him money, bro. So what would that have happened on a potential Colby versus Wonderboy fight? I don't think so. I think Colby would have taken him down for 3 rounds and just tested his cardio. I honestly just wanted Colby on the card just to have Colby on the card. But looking back at it, I think, yeah, Yuri versus Rakic was the way to go. So I'm going to give a point to the UFC. And that has us at, again, 2-2, having the total now at 4-4 between me and the UFC matchmakers. Now we go into the main card, and you already know, opening up the main card, we had Bo Nickel versus Cody Brundage. What we could have gotten, though, was the return of Brock Lesnar versus Derek Lewis. Now, you guys are all going to call me crazy now because UFC 300 is over and all that shebang. But beforehand, all you guys in the comments, all you guys in the MMA community were saying that there was a chance that Brock Lesnar was going to come back because he also fought on 100 and 200 similar to Jim Miller. So, hypothetically, there is a chance he could come back on 300. Bro should have came back for 300 and fought Derek Lewis. He did not need to fight, another champion or, a top 5 guy. No, a fun fight to make for the fans, for UFC 300. Derek Lewis, bro, a fan favorite versus Brock Lesnar. And now that they didn't make that fight, Brock Lesnar's probably never coming back. Like, before it was probably, I'd give it like a good 40% chance they could have surprised us with it. Like a real good 40% chance. Now it's 0. And with Derek Lewis, the crazy thing is, like, he could have gone from fighting Brock Lesnar, bro, a former world champion, a huge name, to now fighting Rogelio Nascimento. Like, bro, what? Like, absolutely, fumbled. The UFC absolutely fumbled with that. And instead, opening up the main card, they gave us Bo Mid-Nickel versus Cody, even worse, Brundage, man. Horrible fight, bro, honestly. Good performance by Bo Nickel because that's what he's supposed to do. But bro was supposed to do that in the first round. He took a whole, I think 8 to 9 minutes to be able to do that to Cody Brundage, bro. To Cody Brundage, man. So, I mean, that's what happens, bro. I honestly think that these matchmakers should have brought back Brock Lesnar or even opened up the card with a bang, bro. How are you going to open up the MSG card all those years ago with Gaethje and Chandler? But then when it comes to UFC 300, you open it up with Bo Nickel, bro. And Cody Brundage, I forgot to mention. So, yeah, that's an absolute point for us. Then we go into the next fight. What we got on UFC 300 was Charles the Bronx Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. But what we could have gotten was Usman versus Whitaker. Now, I'm going to be completely honest. I love a potential fight between Kamaru Usman and Robert Whitaker. I think that's an awesome fight, bro. Like, there's a lot of history behind that. They don't have history between each other, but, bro, Usman, former welterweight champion, GOAT, versus Whitaker, former middleweight champion. Maybe not a GOAT, but bro is for sure top 5, greatest middleweights of all time. So I think that would have been an amazing fan for I think that would have been an amazing fight for the fans, for the casuals, for the hardcores, man. And who knows how that fight would have played out, bro. Imagine if Usman would have won. He would have been literally right there, top 5 to fight for a belt. And same thing for Whitaker, bro. For Whitaker to take out Usman, that would have been cool. But on paper, I don't prefer that over Arman and Charles Oliveira. But it is tricky, though, because with this fight with Arman and Charles Oliveira, now looking at the fight, I wish it was 5 rounds. I get that a lot of people are trying to make the argument, well, those are the 2 rounds. Arman was just going to hold him down. Bro, Charles, even at the end of the fight, had that submission attempt, that Darce on Arman Tsarukyan. Who knows if he would have came out in that 4th, 5th round and done something similar, man. I think it was so close. I could see definitely how you could give it for Arman. I think I'd personally give it towards Arman, but I don't think Charles is that far behind, because if you're judging it based solely on the judging criteria, I think Charles won that fight, bro, because he had the submission attempts, over the control. But I think all our questions would have been answered if it was a 5-round fight. And if it was a 5-round fight, this fight would not have been on UFC 300. Kind of similar to Dustin taking on Benoit, man. They wanted to make that on UFC 300, but he was like, nah, I want 5 rounds. They made it a month before in Miami. Would that have benefited the fight? 100%. But for the pick, I'm going to go with Charles and Arman. I still really love the idea of Usman and Whitaker. But yeah, I am going to go with Charles and Arman just because, bro, I really like both of those guys. So yeah, next up on the card, we had Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje, which I don't know how I'm even going to beat that, versus Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier 3. And this is a no-brainer, bro. Of course, Max and Justin won this stuff, man. The thing is, when we were doing like the whole bookings for UFC 300, I thought for sure they were gonna have Justin Gaethje on there, and at the time we didn't know what the heck was gonna happen with Dustin. I didn't think Max was gonna be an option. You know, I always liked the idea of Max moving up to 55 and staying there, just because he's been there, done that at 45. Same thing with Volkanovski. Like, I don't know why these guys that win the belt, defend hella times, and then lose the belt, and then beat so many contenders. Like, why do you stay there? You know, like, move up. Fresh new faces, fresh new challenges, and it's just even more exciting for the fans. So yeah, honestly though, I'm really happy that they put together the Max and Gaethje fight. I knew Max was going to win that fight, and same thing with the Dustin Poirier and Benoit, man. On hindsight, I was really scared for Dustin going into to that fight with Benoit, but I am glad that they made that matchup, man. So yeah, we are going to give a point to the UFC for that one. And now in the co-main event, we had Zhang Weili versus Yang Zhannam, the battle for China against our Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 3. And of course, we're going to pick Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira 3. You know, I like the Jamal Hill fight for Alex Pereira. I thought it was a cool fight as well. You know, looking at the fight, the whole fight week, I was super hyped up for that fight, man. But I would have been even more hyped up, to be honest. Actually, I think I would have been the same amount of hyped up for Izzy moving up to 205 and having the third fight with Alex Pereira, just because there's so much history behind those two guys, putting it on UFC 300, you know, having it in a bigger stage for everyone to see. I thought that would have been cool of the UFC. But, you know, I'm not mad that they made the Jamal Hill matchup, but still, for this specific one, I am 100% picking Izzy and Alex over Weili and Jan. And now we're going to the main event of UFC 300. We had Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill to what could have been Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Now, in hindsight, I think it was crazy for me to put Conor and Chandler over Pereira and Izzy. I actually don't know why I did that, if I'm being completely honest. I don't know what was going through my head. But do I prefer Conor and Chandler over Pereira and Hill? Oh man, actually I don't. I don't, man. I'm letting you know right now, I'm super excited for Chandler and Conor. Like, I think that's going to be an amazing fight. And I hope, I'm going to make a video about this later on this week, but there's rumors going around that they're potentially going to make that for a new 165-pound weight class belt. So I'm pretty excited for that. Hopefully that comes true. I've been screaming, bro. Like, they should make 165 and then move 170 to 175 for the longest time, bro. But I'm super excited for Conor and Chandler. But if I'm being honest, man, I was really excited for Alex Pereira and Jamal Hill. I thought that was going to be an amazing fight. I thought it was the appropriate headliner for UFC 300, man. Just because if they would have put Conor on UFC 300, I don't think they would have had him as a co-main event, man. Maybe they would have, but I just don't think so. So that automatically eliminates him from the conversation, man. But yeah, still super excited for Conor and Chandler, but I do think Jamal Hill and Alex was the right decision. So that being said, that puts us at 3 versus 2 for the main card going into the UFC's favor, man. That puts us at an unfortunate total of 7 versus 6, man. Ugh, I lost the matchmaking war to the UFC, man. But overall, what card was better in quality? I think UFC 300, man. I think it was a good card. Like I'm saying, like, for certain fights, like, we did not need Jessica Andrade on the card. We definitely didn't need Holly Holm, and we for sure did not need Bo Nickel. But it was cool that they were on the card. I'm just, maybe next time, like, put, you know, Colby on there, put Wonder Boy, Usman, Whitaker, Hamza, Costa. Just You know, or Lesnar. Actually, bro, that's so sad that they didn't put Brock Lesnar, man. I'm actually super bummed out about that. But more other big stars, you know, around the UFC. That would have been nice to see. But yeah, man, overall, I enjoyed UFC 300, man. Kind of sad that my card didn't end up, you know, playing out the way I thought it would be, but it is what it is. Please, you guys, if you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more type of content like this, I could maybe even do tier lists, bro. I know a lot of people in the MMA community, they do tier lists and stuff like that. Impressions list. I don't think I could do the impressions, but yeah, you guys, if you guys want to see more videos like that, please drop a comment down below, like the video, and subscribe. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.